to support poetry and the poets in an age where we have an increasing relationship with the screen, in an age of fast-moving images. Poetry is not fast, it's not instantaneous, not in its creation and not in its sharing. Poetry demands care and craft to write it and a listening ear to absorb it. And we will do our very best to make it worthwhile. Recently, my granddaughter heard a small noise coming from her children's bedroom. So she crept in, the children were asleep, and she approached her 4-year-old, who was whispering something in her sleep. She put her ear down the little girl's mouth and heard her say, Esther HaMalka, Queen Esther. If our dreams could speak and we could hear them, perhaps they would sound like the poetry and music we hope to share tonight. And although each of us write very differently one from the other, it also seems to me we dream differently, but I believe there will be a shared subtext. Surely we will hear the emotions of fear and faith, song and courage, and the courage that it takes to risk the edge of the known world in all arts when you go off on the edge and you're not sure how to reel yourself back and you're creating a new creation. And of course, the subtext of the rhythm that beats in our veins for good news for Am Yisrael, for the redemption. It says in the Megillah, Vatichtav Esther HaMalka, Queen Esther wrote. She took this seemingly disjointed and inexplicable and long spread out events. Purim was over many years, these events. The Megillah sounds like it's all compressed, but it wasn't. It was really a record of something that happened over years. And she had it put into the Megillah so that future generations could read it. They could see the whole unfolding of events. They could see the hand of God. They could see our salvation. And they could see how we awakened against that master annihilator Haman. And the way we reached unity, as it says, Ke'ish echad belev echad, like one person with one heart, and our ultimate joy in which we celebrate and share. Perhaps in this tradition of Esther and the Megillah, we as writers take the empty scroll that is our life and we fill it with poetry that forms a commentary that connects us in our lives, the events of our lives. It connects the dots between person and God or between people. Thus we offer a shared language, and thus we offer dreams that we'll have spoken. Each of us, Mindy Aber-Barad, Esther Cameron, Wendy Dickstein, Ruth Vogelman, and myself, Judy Belsky, have filled many scrolls, that is, many books with words and poems and writing. And some of these are on display for browsing and for purchase. And we will have a coffee break long enough for coffee and nosh and a good look. So we look forward to the beautiful flute music of Devorah Belenki, of the Shevet Achim Ensemble. And without further ado, let's start with a song. for getting us started. I'd like to introduce our first reader, Mindy Aber-Barad. A few words about Mindy. Mindy moved to Israel in 1977. She has a BA from Washington University in the Old Country in St. Louis, and an LLB from Hebrew University. Her first love is not law, but writing. Her prize-winning poetry, stories, book reviews, and essays have been published both in English and Hebrew in publications both online and offline. Mindy is the Israel co-editor of the Duranda Review. Her book of poetry, The Land That Fills My Dreams, is available for sale tonight. It sits on my coffee table, and on Shabbat, I like to take a little dip into it each week because I love how Mindy writes. Her poetry is very spare and chiseled and crafted, and it's very beautiful. Many years ago, on a personal note, Mindy attended a writers' conference that I helped to organize with some other folks. And I had never seen her before. She walked in and I said, "Hi, will you take the money?" I'm allergic to math, allergic to money. And she said, "By the way, I'll take the money, but I don't really know if I belong here because I'm not really sure if I'm a poet. I'm not really sure if I'm a writer." And I said, "You took off from work to come here for the whole day conference? You're attracted to this conference? Yes. You're a writer. Come on in." And since that moment, we have trusted each other with money, with poems, and with trust. So, Mindy.
I'm starting off with a poem that requires no introduction. Nothing does. The Shook. In a dream, I am watching history rewritten as I age. My back alleys, night silence invaded. Rivers of people, roar of beers, stalls sealed against the revelers. The now packed alleys don't believe me, just watch. No more quiet street sweeper pushing his broom into the deep darkness towards the end of another day. Fruits, vegetables, and fish, none of that. Competing music, here metal, there trance. Rock down the block, old friends, new loves. And what did we do in the then, when nothing flowed like it does now, when the lights were turned off at 10 p.m.? Midnight was witnessed solely by the bats, congregated in the tops of ancient trees. I am the elder now, and they cannot hear me, nor can I. My thoughts see smoke, my eyes feel the beat of the street. If the population has exploded, that would explain the packed tables, filled ashtrays, empty glasses. What a lot to recycle, a lot to take in and comprehend. Do I want to be included or left behind with the broom? I'm having fun. Maybe I'll switch my glasses too. It shows my age. It's fun. Okay. Blessed. He came up from Africa searching for me, while I was looking south all along through dark forests. He came up from the land of his own heart to a new land where love and understanding flow. He searched the empire for a lost princess, exiled from her heart, who climbed a tree for a better view. And our souls met on waves of music of distant vineyards, and the leaves softly clapped, dissolved into his ocean, ever reaching for my shore. I could hear him search through the years. His song filled and ebbed, and again. I imagined all along that he was on the long, short path, filled with thorns and sirens, yet he was not distracted. I know that now. Bleeding, he persisted, round every turn, the only one expectant, appreciative, listening for the beat of my heart in the sap of the tree. Cool. Okay, this is 4 haikus, and I call them the 4 white chicken haikus, with special thanks to William Carlos Williams. Number 1, Sparkling in sunlight, silent red wheelbarrow stands beside white chickens.
You want us to do that?
We'll see.
Okay.
Number 2, beside fried chicken, poetic fast food takeout, red wheelbarrow sign. Number 3, beside wild chickens, shadowed by red wheelbarrow, free-ranging, alive. And number 4, red wheelbarrow rests, while white chickens scratch and peck at gravel and crumbs. Okay, now I'm going to read one from the book. This is the title poem, The Land That Fills My Dreams. I drink the land that pours into a spring and quenches the thirst of great mountains. The land fills my pockets with ancient secrets of copper trinkets of days and centuries. I coddle and cajole the flocks on the land and guide them forward to the echoing valley. The soil of the land is under my nails, its grit in the wrinkled brows of the elders. I grill the land whose sweet savor I offer as a gift, and the earlock of smoke curls around and around and around. The land magnifies my vision tenfold and brings the stars down close to the branches of the trees. I dress the land in linens and silks. On holidays we dance in the crimson and gold that flow through the land. I sip the fine aged essence at the end of the day of the land that fills my dreams.
Beautiful. Thank you, Wendy. More?
I have more time, yeah?
Anybody keeping time?
I timed it.
Good.
Okay. This is called Supernatural. It's a found poem, and with many thanks to Air France's in-flight magazine, which I don't remember the name of it, but anyway, okay. The balance. Beechwood and sandalwood, citron-flavored stick figures emerge from a sleek black barrel, gray pearl module, circular economy, fluid identities, more noodles. In hunting season, Villa Elise. On an unexpected Sunday, I am in rare spirits, no longer bottled up, my pocket-sized words forgotten in my self-importance. I am present, prolific, I travel the world, languorous music in my ears. Geolocation. Within my daily little choreography, I discover a cube of gold in a scented hat box, refreshing ideas for warmth, not ruined art, abstracted, abducted, pigeonholed. Amber zucchini flowers, dandelion seeds, mindful alchemy, my framed libretto, Genesis with vegetable brush in hand. That can't be far from God's own perspective. We are each an original, framed and signed by strategic patrimony, a benevolence traditionally committed to innovation, unrestrained, gravity master, supernatural. No one's keeping time, but I kept time. Okay, they're short, and that one's gonna, okay. Over the ocean. I'll do an, okay. When I introduce Judy, I'm going to talk about oceans. Okay. Over the ocean. What I seek is not over the ocean, but under an olive tree. My beloved is the expectant sky, awaiting its first clouds, that bubbly dark ones, those whose job it is just to quench. The answer is just beyond my lips, a taste away from pure immersion. I anticipate the encompassing, the flow around me and within, not over the ocean, but from the replenished spring that nourishes the olive tree. All right, one more and I'll call it a night. How's that? Okay. One more. Yeah, okay. The moon that night. The moon that night, its reflection dripped over the lake, spilled onto glowing ridges, no boundaries between moon and lake. They yearned to be together, yet the moon rose farther. By midnight, the moon returned to itself. Nothing new about the moon for those who hadn't known. And the lake quietly returned to its darkness. No desire to lap the shore, nudge the pebbles, unseen.
Please, music. Music maestro.
So I'm going to the nigun that I played before is called Baba Mainzes, and it's Breslov nigun. The one I'm going to play now is also Breslov. It's called Nigun Rabbi Nachman. It was apparently it was written by Rabbi Nachman, and he's the one who said all of my steps go to Eretz Yisrael. Apropos,
Perfect.
The poems that we were just listening to. So Nigun Rabbi Nachman. This one is called. It was found. The notes to it were found dated the beginning of the 20th century, 1901, I think, and it's called the Nigun, which accompanies the tzaddikim to Gan Eden. That's how it was entitled.
Hard to come back after that. It's transporting. Our next reader is Wendy Dickstein. Wendy was born in New Haven, Connecticut. And when she was 12, she published her first poem entitled My Favorite Autumn Leaf in the local newspaper. It was dedicated to her grandfather, Jack Horowitz, who was then in the hospital. As a teenager, she moved with her family to Australia, where she studied English literature at Monash and Melbourne universities. And by the age of 16, she was regularly publishing poems in Australia's small literary journals. She has lived in England, India, and Los Angeles before settling in Jerusalem more than 30 years ago. She has published poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction in the US, Canada, India, and Israel. She has been the literary editor of Ba'or HaTorah since 1994, I think Wendy and I met on the page before we met in person, and for the past 2 years has served on the editorial board of Voices Israel, the annual journal of poetry from Israel and abroad. Wendy Dickstein's books include the story of her spiritual journey from India to Israel, a memoir, a short story collection, and an adventure story for young readers set in Petra. Her poetry chapbook, Alexander Pope in India, has just been published, hot off the press, and on our author's table. Wendy and I met a number of years ago over poetry, and we have never found a reason to disrupt the one long conversation that we started then about poetry, editing, and encouragement of each other's work. Wendy.
When I was a student in Melbourne, I had a friend named Loretta Kaplan. We were both Jewish, but neither of us knew much about Judaism. Many years later, we met up again in Los Angeles. I had begun studying with Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner, who had come from Lakewood to bring some authentic Jewish learning to the LA community. Loretta had changed her name to Anastas, and she was on her own spiritual search. She turned up in a flowing orange outfit with a big round picture of her guru around her neck. His name was Rajneesh, and he was a controversial figure who, among other things, owned 94 Rolls Royces. My friend Anastas died about a year ago, still searching. This poem is in memory of her and also of Rabbi Kerzner, who died much too young, but touched the lives of so many. It's called For My Sister, the Sannyasin. My guru drives a worn-out Cadillac a rich man gave in charity. My guru is a small, black-suited man with curled-up earlocks, square hands, and clear eyes. He tells it straight from Sinai, pulls no punches, translating ancient verbiage into words I understand deeper than thought. No flowing robes, wild eyes, or floating hair, but real as bread, strong as sweet red wine, sure as a slender candle streaming light. He pours the world like water from his hand, cold, living water from a source so deep, so old, we hardly dare to think it yet endures. It comes up splashing, washing us awake and clean and whole. The next poem is Portraits in Prayer, 1. When Michal turned 12, she was afraid to bless the wine. Go ahead, her mother said. You're a Jewish woman now. The silver cup filled to the brim. Her mouth found the words. Remember the Sabbath day. Blessed art thou, creator of the fruit of the vine. Her great-grandmothers, leaning down, sang her to Sinai. 2. When they take out the Torah, Reuven likes to be there. Reuven, unstable as water, stands at the bima, waving his hands, raising his prayer shawl over his head, up and down 100 times. When they spread the velvet mantle over the scroll between blessings, he strokes it as if it were a cat. Each week they offer him a blessing, and each week he declines. He just wants to be close to the Torah. Reuven, first flowering of my strength, though his tribe be few, let him be included in the count. 3. Old man with the face of a child has no son. His daughter leads him slow as a starfish down 3 steps to shul. Sits him in the first row, prayer book in hand. His eyes look through clouds. All he recalls is the intimate posture of prayer. 4. Yigal is saying Kaddish. We hold our breath. We've never heard it magnified and sanctified like this before. Every word flings wide the borders of the heart, beyond any blessing, song, praise, and consolation uttered in the world. His Father listens, leaning down between the shoulders of angels. The next poem was written after a visit to Thessalonica, Greece. It's called Salonika, Mother of Israel. The toy seller's shadow stains the street. Her burden of balloons blooms over the Aegean Sea. From a cafe drift the strains of a George Delaris song. You opened the door and left everything in pieces. She lingers to listen. A boy buys a balloon. The song resumes. All that binds us walks away like steps on the stairs. In Roman, Spanish, Ottoman times, this was a Jewish town. La Madre de Israel, the poets called it. On Sabbath, the harbor fell silent. Eggs baked overnight in the ovens, huevos haminados. 1942, Black Sabbath. 9,000 Jewish men and boys entrapped in Freedom Square. The Nazis kept them sweltering there for hours. Months later, when they got to Auschwitz, the other inmates almost rejoiced, thinking these husky watermen had come to set them free. Today, you'd never know 60,000 Jews once lived here, but for the lone menorah, artful mesh of bodies and flames, and the street sign, Jewish Martyrs Square, defaced so often they keep a stockpile of spares. Bleak-eyed each evening, the toy seller roams Aristoteles Square. Above the gaudy port soar 60,000 unseen souls, ghosts of lost balloons. This poem, in 2016, when the knife intifada began, I decided that the first thing I should do was to take a self-defense class, so I would not be so terrified. Thank God I did not have to use what I learned so far, but at least I got a poem out of the experience. It's called Self-Defense Workshop for the Elderly, Jerusalem, 2016. At 9 o'clock sharp, they take out the knives, only rubber to blunt the edge of our dread. Brittle women in a padded room, our feet squeak on the parquet floor as we take turns being stabber and stabbed, rip the words out of our bellies and our throats. No, no, no. When I get home, Ahmed is planting my garden. Geraniums, jasmine, lavender, and snapdragons, lion's throats in Hebrew. He turns over the earth, waters each seedling, petal by petal, leaf by leaf, patient as a father bathing a child. When I go inside to make him sweet black coffee, the radio is playing, another stabbing at Jaffa Gate. Years ago, on a mountain in Australia, I met an old priest from Bendigo. When I told him I was from Jerusalem, he observed, "We all get mixed together on this earth." This is a poem about my father, who died quite young. 8 minutes. My father died quietly and by chance in the holy city of Sfat. In his eulogy, the rabbi could not say he had fulfilled all the commandments. Still, he is buried there with the Ari, the holy lion, and the rest of the Kabbalist sages, beneath the hills to which all mouths turn in time of prayer. He paused there in his wanderings, and he was gathered to his fathers in the place towards which we slowly, scrupulously, all our lives strive. My father lived trustful as a child, without great intention, coming always to the highest place, quietly and by chance. I have the great privilege of living in Nachlaot, 2 steps away from Machane Yehuda. On Fridays, the place is full of life. And as Rabbi Shalom Gold has so beautifully said, if you want to see God, go to the shuk. This poem is called Friday at Machane Yehuda. The candy store on Agrippa Street borders the shuk on 3 sides. On the east corner, a schnorrer squats in the shade, extends a parched hand. Want spirals from her crumpled shopping bag. On the south side, shabby Arab boys balance trays of Sabbath pastries on their heads. A Hawaiian tourist tries to capture them, but the boys slide out of the camera's frame. On the west corner, beside a stand of candy necklaces, a narrow man with a black hat and a boy stands by a plastic chair piled with swirls of leather. A holy hawker, "Tefillin," he cries, vies with the halva seller, offers to twine the Hebrew letter shin between their eyes. The passing parade of Friday shoppers savor a sliver of sesame or a sacred moment braided between Sabbath loaves. Yeah. One more.
Okay.
I'm debating. I think I'll read a slightly different poem called Pensioner's Winter Vacation, Sfat 2019. This is a very recent poem. The Canaan Spa is still on a hill, but its standards are slipping. The managers have lost their hair, and the towels have gone missing. At breakfast, the old people clamor for bread, but it's still baking. They stand in a ragged line waiting. When it finally appears, they hack the hot loaves to pieces. Arthritic hands take turns with the one blunt bread knife. The tour guide, clad in tag, hat, and beard, is high on holy weed and Isaac Luria. He leads them down winding lanes to the cheese factory, where the holy cheesemaker shows them empty vats and tells them the toilet is broken. At the Ashkenazi Ari Shul, the guide says, "Don't forget to kiss the mezuzah," but he knows there is no mezuzah, a jest grotesque as Korach. Back at the spa, the old people cast off white toweling robes. In sagging swimsuits, they splash into the hot tub, greedy for warmth. Bright plastic slippers scatter like lifeboats at water's edge. 12 minutes.
A bit of music, Maestro.
This is called Nigun Baal Shem Tov. It is attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, and a melody of closeness to Hashem, to the Creator.
music-laden night. She dipped her quill in music, and rows of coloured lights dancing with the quivering violin's shadow against the ancient stones, and low crusader arches embedded in the city's walls. She dipped her quill in night, and rows of flashing sparks of light, of hooting owls, of bats who sailed from tree to tree, and of a rubble stage transformed to a carpet of burnished gold. I went to a poetry workshop with the visiting Canadian poet, Seymour Main, who taught us about word sonnets, a form he innovated using 14 words, one word on a line. For months after this workshop, I found myself jotting down word sonnets wherever I was, standing at a red light, waiting for a bus, anywhere. I'm including a couple of them this evening, and however, I decided in my book to write them, to put them in a more conventional layout. My friend, don't allow life's burdens to bow your back, nor anger to block your light. Have you ever noticed that when you laugh, you just can't be angry? Laughter, a sea of sparkling light, a sea of sparkling laughter reflecting light. Laughter of my grandchildren overflowing from the purest souls, inflecting others to laugh as well. Laughter bubbles, pushes away heaviness and anger, opens doors to love. My next two poems are from the first section of my book, both set in the Old City. Both portray the peaceful relations that exist between the Jewish community and the non-Jewish in the Old City, and I'd like to think in a wider field. At the Cobblers. At a tiny stand in an old city alley, your feet resting on the pedal of your sewing machine, you sit day after day, surrounded by sneakers, boots, sandals, suit jackets, and jeans. Today, an empty white teacup with a blue IDF emblem stands near your feet, and a leather handbag dangles from a cardboard board, balanced atop another on a shelf above your head. Olive green cloth on knees, open can of glue in hand, you stitch a patch of leather inside my shoe. With thick needle between black-tipped fingers, you stitch it fast. But more than my shoe connects us. Year after year, I walk the cobbled path, past your stall, in the city that is our home. And every day I greet you. Peace be unto you, Abu Izam. A Taste of Coexistence. The shopping cart is far too heavy for me to heave up the old city's cobbled steps. Can you help me, please? I ask a young woman in spiked heels and hijab. The two of us, both with covered head, carry the cart up the stone steps. A glimpse of Eden. The title poem of my book was originally written at a Voices workshop in Jerusalem. Colour was the theme of this workshop, and this is what came out. What colour are your dreams? Are they blue like the eyes of a peacock's tail? Blue like a guitar strumming a sad tune? Or blue as the fragrance of an ocean when it meets the noonday sky? Are they crimson like the mantle of a king? Crimson like the sweep of harp strings within the palace courts? Or crimson as a groom's passion on his wedding night? Are they gold like the specks of sun on morning dew? Gold like a shiny trumpet's blast? Or gold as the smile of a bride? Are they purple like the cloak of a queen? Purple like a nocturne played on piano? Or purple as the scent of jacaranda brushing clouds? No, my dreams are white, white like a dove's luminescent wings. And here's another 14-word poem. Cycle. Jerusalem twirls in a circle dance at midnight. Jerusalem sings in a glow of golden light. Jerusalem runs as a main thread throughout this collection. And as Professor Harold Fish has said, Jerusalem is a place, but more than it is a place, it is an idea enclosed in a place, or rather in the air above it. Thus, Jerusalem appears in many of my poems in both the physical and mystical sense. Another of the themes I address is dance, specifically the circle dance, with shifting aspects of the theme in the two different sections of my book. In the first section, my poem is entitled Circle Dance. Circles dance under grapevines in the breeze, dancers in white garments, borrowed robes, singing rondo under grapevines, dancing to drum beats with the song of birds. Circles dance up the hills, up to Jerusalem, up to the mountain of myrrh, through the 7 gates, down the narrow alleys, along the tunneled ways, holding hands, for in their dance they are complete. And on the mountain of myrrh, forgiveness and truth hold hands with peace, and with joy they dance in the center of the circle dance. Do you know that women do dance at the kotel? Especially on Rosh Chodesh. Especially on Chol Moed, and even this last Friday, I danced with you, Tamar, on Rosh Chodesh. This poem, which appears in the second section of my book, came to me one Chol Moed Pesach, when we were dancing during a very long, uplifting, and melodious Hallel. The festive circle dance. It only takes 3 to start a circle dance. We unclasp hands and invite the wrinkled woman with gold-edged robes. We open our circle and invite the girl in blue jeans and smile at the woman who scowls, as if to say, let light dispel your darkness. And the circle widens as we dance on. We invite the wise woman, the scowler, the simple woman, and those who know not what to ask. Our festive circle dance uplifts, strengthens, and unites as we embrace in our dance. And my last poem for the moment, okay. The early hours of the kotel during the months of Elul and Tishri are all the more special with the shofarot sounding, one after the other, towards the end of the tefillah. The shofar. Inhale the shofar's blasts, and let its white voice expand as it whirls within you. As the call expands in you, let it transport you to Sinai, when the sound shook the ground and the mountain wrapped in smoke. When the shofar's light swirls and let its warmth seep into your bones and carry you on wings beyond the storm winds of the south, to the time when a great shofar is heard and a new light shines, when lambs frolic with wolves and a child romps with snakes, when no one is afraid and all creatures know the one, endless, timeless one.
Line from Penny Lane. And though she feels as if she's in a play, she is anyway. Perhaps some year when donning costumes, people will think about that line, about the characters they play in life, and what the prompter wants them to say next. So, without further ado, here is the story. My father's mother's name was Esther. Had I been named by Jewish custom, likely I would have been named Esther from the start, and thus been spared this journey. But my parents weren't Jewish, so instead my father's mother suggested that they call me Beatrice, after the heroine, as she quaintly put it, of the Divine Comedy, which was odd, since Dante's Beatrice is not a heroine. She neither acts nor suffers, just appears as a symbol of divine intelligence or something. There's some Kabbalistic influence. Wow, did I hate that name, even before I hit first grade and it became a source of humor to the kids who hated me. I won't repeat the variations they played on it. Eventually I clipped it to B. Although that did not wholly solve the problem, for that name has homonyms, all of which, by the time this plot begins to thicken, I had been reminded of many times. In a French dictionary of names for Beatrice, I found the warning, a promise of beauty and happiness difficult to keep. About my looks when I was young, opinions differed, but that I was not a candidate for happiness was clear. I was the girl on the sidelines at the dance. My other problem was that I aspired to be a poet, but did not believe I had sufficient talent. So I thought I'd teach the thing I'd loved the best, but then found that I didn't like the atmosphere in academic studies. Malcontent, I got sucked into the maelstrom of the 60s, but being just a little over age, also much too cerebral and judgmental, did not find many kindred spirits there. So I was like a vessel no one needed, a stone which there was no one to turn over, when Paul Celan was introduced to me as a prospective dissertation topic. The poems spoke to me. They speak to many, although they are not quickly understood. You feel as if you've received an urgent telegram you can't quite read. There's something you must do. Of course, the background is that utter darkness which he refused to name. He tried instead to summon something else out of the depths that could salvage what was left and give new life to human hope. He gave that hope a shape. You see her now and then behind the words. And now and then he hinted at a name. Not so much in the German which he wrote, as in the English he knew how to read. Among the possibilities of language, which he explored with unmatched thoroughness, are interlingual puns. I didn't hear them at first, or want to hear. My mind was blank. Then my professor prompted me to read a book on Kabbalah, which introduced me to the Sfirot Bina, or understanding, and Malchut, Knesset Israel, Shekhinah. The figure Dante drew has traits of both. I met him once, and at a certain moment, it seemed to me he hinted at that name. I froze and gave no answering sign, which in that moment and long after seemed to me like the failure which can never be forgiven. But then I didn't have an answer ready. All this was just loose pieces in my head, until a year after he'd made his exit. Then, after turbulence I won't describe, I faced it in a spirit of assessment. I had received an offer of employment of sorts, to try and play this character upon the stage of the world, to try and say what she, Ms. Wisdom and Community, would say were she to put on flesh and blood and step forth from the shadows of concealment. I knew I was no natural for the role. No one would be, of course. It was absurd. But then Celan had said something about the majesty of the absurd, and I could see that the attempt, however maladroit, would be at least a way of bearing witness, if only to the fact that poetry can still make one thing and another happen, that words in this world of numbers still have meaning. And no one else had found a use for me. So I decided I would take the part, though knowing I'd be awful. And indeed, the blunders that I made at trials lasting decades are mortifying to recall. The summer after I came to this decision, I saw an advertisement in the back of a collection of essays on Celan for a poem interpreting the Purim story as the emergence of a hidden order represented by the leading figure. Then at the dentist's office, paging through an issue of McCall's, I found a story by Sylvia Plath about someone named Esther. It said she wished that she had been born Jewish. I dropped in at Hillel a few months later and met the rabbi, who had just turned in a dissertation on the Book of Esther. This focused me on a poem by Celan, in which he seems to give this character, whom he had shaped and called by that other name, the name of Esther, who also had two names. So I began to feel as if I had a Hebrew name, though it was not yet clear that I'd convert. Celan's work seemed addressed to all the dwellers in this darkening world. I heard in it a call to come together and try to think as everyone, sort out our knowledge of the world and of ourselves, and draw conclusions, plot a course of action that could affect the process of the world more favorably than thoughtless agitation. Over the course of several years, I tried to gather people for that purpose, pull them into a center that I thought I saw. The vessels that I fashioned shattered quickly. I couldn't start community from scratch. Between successive flops, I started learning Hebrew and stopping by on Friday nights. I came to understand I was beholden and bound to the tradition he had seemed to move away from, and in any case, I wouldn't last outside it. So again, I said, okay. And after I was in, my mother looked in an old family record and found my great-grandmother's name. So this had evidently been planned from the beginning. But then, and afterwards, arose the question whether I should forget what brought me here and simply try to be a Jewish woman, which is work enough for several incarnations, or if there was some reason why I had to take that devious and dubious path, something Celan had run away to find and wanted to send back, although he couldn't come back himself. I will try here and now, before that hook comes out of the wings to drag me off the stage I've occupied too long, to answer briefly. I will say, perhaps the poem always is that queen commissioned to come unbidden to the hidden court of the ego occupied with rank and power, caught up in realistic calculations, subject to promptings of the darker impulse. Amid that court, the poem must appear as manifestation of a different law, a different order, which could come to life if the golden scepter were held out to it. Rav Kook thought poetry could play a role in the reviving state, which thought has yet to be unfolded fully by his students. I'll further say, if it is recognized that poetry is the central human function, then from that center certain steps might follow in all directions. I have tried to think these thoughts as far out as my mind could stretch, and my collected works on Amazon are the result of nearly half a century of multifarious study and reflection. Of course, it's possible I'm really crazy. It's also possible that sanity is what is killing us. The sages linked the tree of knowledge to Haman, perhaps poetry's one branch of the tree of life, separated from Torah by mistake, under the pressure of those scattering forces that make it hard for Israel, too, to gather itself and make a stand. By the way, those last words are almost a quote from Paul Celan, whose words still keep on surfacing in my thoughts. He knew the ancient hatred would resurge and Israel would be hard-pressed. I wish he could have stayed around to back me up instead of leaving me to fight alone against, among other things, the supposition that this is just a fantasy of mine. But let me make this clear. I never thought that anything he said was meant for me alone. The one he called by name was merely the midpoint of the circle of his hearers, of all those who could think the pronoun you meant him or her, each one in whom a spark of the Shekhinah waits for its redemption. So let me here call out to Mordechai, to anyone who could take on that role or knows somebody who might take it on. Knos et HaYehudim, gather the Jews to think about this play that's being played and what role each could act in it, the ways in which each one could manifest the order that needs to rise here for the whole world's sake. I'd also like to say, come to my feast, read me, and give my work a chance to speak to you. Believe that it will speak to others. I know that it is late to dream such dreams. I'm waking every morning with a sense that time is carrying us like a freight train toward an election 1 Gregorian month from now, behind which dispossession looms on either side. What can we do about it? The world unrolls by the laws of Medes and Persians, though Darwin is the name you hear these days. But as the events I've told impressed on me, there is an alternate causality. There have been miracles here, as we all know. Perhaps the miracle that's needed now is a resolve that could face down the doubt of ourselves and our meaning for the world that our revealed leaders seem often prey to. Doubt, say the sages, is what Amalek stands for. Perhaps you'll think of me on Esther's fast. I pray that only good come of this telling.
Pri Hadash was a cute little street, sort of off of Me'asharim, off of Bukhara, somewhere. It goes like from one to the other. It's a weird street. It's really cool. It's cobblestones. It's teeny tiny, rickety little houses with wonderful people in them, and wonderful people teaching poetry and expanding our consciousness and our mindfulness of words, and including us, including me, in something that I did not know I could actually become part of. Thank you, Judy, for that. So Judy is also a clinical psychologist, everybody. She's a poet, a writer, and an award-winning visual artist, which means she's a painter, among other things. She makes beautiful, beautiful things, waterproof for the sukkah, and beautiful paintings that are not waterproof as well. Okay. She has published a memoir, Thread of Blue, a novel, Who is Annie Whitefish, pretty funny, and most recently, her book of poems entitled Abraham and Sultana, which is about her grandparents, then their journey from Turkey to Seattle, Washington, USA. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Judy is interwoven with her ancestors, her recent ancestors, in a way that's just, she didn't write it on the page, I'm telling you this. Beautiful, beautiful empathy and reliving of their story. She's won numerous writing awards and has poems in creative nonfiction and published in many journals. Her work has been read on NPR, which I think is very impressive. She's taught in college, in community settings. She leads a monthly group of poets for Voices, the Israeli English-speaking poets organization. Her second memoir, The Passover Scarf, is in production, and a new book of poems is in progress. And she writes here, her work rotates on family tradition and loss. Okay, we all have that to some degree. Anyway, Judy is really one of a kind.
Thank you, Mindy. Most poetry journals, you probably know this, have a 40-line limit. That's it. Some of us, right, Esther? We like the poem to sing. We like to give it oxygen. We like to give it its wings. And 40 lines is not going to do it. And so I, too, want to read a longer poem because it's an opportunity to share it. We don't often get journals that want longer poems. This longer poem is kind of a Kaddish poem for my father. His Yortzeit falls on Hanukkah on the third night. And I found myself writing this shortly thereafter. And it's called Father and Daughter. 1. A fan opens to a simple line drawing. A man sits by the shore of a river. He holds a small girl in his arms. The fan inches open, but its origami edges hold back secrets in its folds. The two play against each other like black and white. One needs the other for clarity. A painted fan is a series of poems. 2. My mother delivers me into his arms. I breathe deeply when she releases me. Maybe she does too. 3. I try to match my heartbeat to his, Edwardian England and post-war baby. I'm an arrow that points back to his mother and forward to his future. 4. He remembers the Irwell, the Irk, and the Medlock, Manchester's trio of rivers. A crane breaks surface and disappears with a small fish held like secrets in its mouth. I push the fan open wider. 5. Underwater float the remnants of aquatic journeys, flotsam of hulls, the canvas of sails, fragments of oars, the skeleton of a canoe. I follow the neuron trail to the point where memory and laughter concur. He wheedled money from his grandmother, the way I wheedle stories from him. He buys a canoe and pays for its mooring. His mother never finds out. He sails away from her anxiety. 6. From his secret canoe, I learned to steer clear of disclosure, to leave the surface calm. I learned to propel my dreams. 7. Shadows cascade across the fan. Heaviness constricts his veins. His father died when he's 3 months old. His mother when he is in his 20s. His sister in his 30s. Another sister marries and disappears. Before he leaves England forever, he fights with his brother. They break each other's noses. Decades pass. He receives the telegram too late to reconcile. The web that holds his past in place unravels. The fan, tinted with the patina of loss, conceals the contours of those figures who hover in the background. 8. He misses the oak Shabbat table, draped in damask, the taste of couscous steamed in its couscousier, the fine threads of saffron, aromatic broth gently ladled into it, the scent still in his olfactory cells and passed by osmosis to mine, the tunes that dance him around the Torah, in the synagogue his grandfather helped to build. He sits in his dead father's seat, his name in brass, inverted letters, a cold kiss on the back of his neck. I wait until his attention shifts. 9. In his adopted landscape, we hike, fish, berry pick apples. We travel the islands by ferry boat. We stay in rough-hewn cabins, muck about in salt pools. I listen to bonfires speak their secrets. I breathe wood smoke laced with briny sea. Of mountains capped all year in snow, my father says, Maravillas del Mundo. Beneath his native English, Castilian Spanish traces itself from Spain to Tetuan, to Gibraltar, to Manchester, then Seattle. 10. Etched back and forth across the fan, the congested markings of migration. He adapts with no undertow of accent, no cliche of the immigrant. From his grafting onto the Pacific Northwest, I learned to shift my thoughts in and out of strange dialects, to build new homes. I invent myself as a wanderer. 11. A good wanderer tracks his position in longitudes of faith, in coordinates of tradition. He keeps his hand laden with kindness, his head full of Talmud, his heart laced with Midrash. He balances carefully around the pervasive Christian culture. He teaches me to chisel my identity, to keep it honed and at a safe distance. 12. Wherever you go, take the cutting you preserve and transplant it in the ground. Build your house in its shade, near a river, from where you may leave again. 13. I become a vessel for his history, a siphon for his experience. The canals of my ears catch the overflow and pour into my brain. I become a series of synapses that snap his memories to mine. I am Urn Girl. 14. A painted fan opens to a simple drawing. A man sits by the shore of a river. He holds a small girl in his arms. I will shift from his arms. When I master the art of nurture, the perfect tension of grip and the timing of release. 15. When he's 18 and the family fortune is gone, he leaves Manchester for Canada and in Vancouver takes a job for quick money to help bring his mother and sister from England. One day in the factory, a pile of boxes lands on him and crushes his kidney. His mother arrives in time to nurse him. The refrain of giving barely misses a beat. 16. The smashed kidney stains the fan, a foretelling of how he will die. When I am 20, his phantom kidney claims his heart. The fan's dark pain backlit by a boy's gift to his mother. 70. When he dies, I hold myself together. I hold myself to keep from flying apart, and then gradually I sense in myself, rib by rib, his visceral understudy, his text safe in the scroll of my veins, and I am consoled. 18. I relinquish the fan for the first time. I turn it over to its tight ivory spine. I have no pictures to go by, no expanding tale, no bright jewels of interlocking poems. The painted story rests and alternates against the unpainted fan. Here, withheld in interior pleats, my mother's story waits for me. That's the end of the fan poem. Thank you. Here are the scrolls that we write with our lives. I remembered a poem that I wrote last year entitled, "Anne Frank is still writing in her diary." One day the line simply came to me, and then the poem followed. Anne Frank is still writing in her diary. Her wrist rushes over the page. The nib of her pen catches on the crossweave of fiber. She stops only to refill it, a small hiss, when 3 drops hit the table. Over the manic music of sirens, over the lurch and screech of trains, over people flying through the air over her head, she writes. No lines are lost on the journey, none left behind on the tracks. In the camp, a woman watches her fill her book. When there are no more pages, she writes in margins. When margins are filled, she writes over her text. Intent as a scribe, she writes in ancient palimpsest. History bleeds through itself until the page is too saturated to give up its secrets. Then, like a tired scroll, she winds herself around the woman's neck. Her fingertips trace letters on the woman's back. She writes on our eyelids as we sleep. In the morning, a slight rush of cool air awakens us. We struggle to open our eyes against the weight of her story. Lastly, this poem I entitled Aliyah. Not immediately apparent why it's Aliyah, but it takes me back to my childhood in the Sephardic enclave in Seattle, Washington, where I grew up, and an early sort of notion that I wasn't going to stay there. My mother and my aunts balanced carefully past the rough rocks to the edge of the shore. They dip their hands in water. They bathe their faces, their necks and arms, and they breathe deeply, and they always say, the sea heals. They offer up thanksgiving. Maravillas del mundo. In the middle of the warmest moment, their arms enclose me. Lights of connection dance in our eyes. The kiss of Ladino, our secret language, moist and ready, waits under the tongue. Just above us, rooks call. One swoops close enough for me to study her iridescent violet glow, her blue-black wing. The crystal globe of her eye conceals a compartment in her brain that stores complex knowledge of migration, its exact timing and direction. In that eye, I see the map of my wandering. I will be extracted from this enchanted circle, suspended between longing for the familiar and intense wanderlust. My reluctant roots will cling to earth, but I will pull away, half attached. A move in any direction incurs loss. The tenderest roots will snap as I break away. I am here and not here. Longing marks me. One day, to reach home, I will battle upstream like salmon whose blood is beaten black during their manic migration. Aliyah. Velo Yada, with the power of my foot. I'm afraid to be Queen Esther. She'll be taken from her home, sent to a foreign palace, chosen by a terrifying king. She'd have awful choices. Go to him, or let her people be killed. Silence engulfs her as she waits and waits in a gilded chamber. Her anguished prayer, Kaylee, should I stay? Kaylee, should I go? Lama azaftani. I want to escape before I find myself in Esther moments, waiting for a moment to open its secret door, then falling into the seams of faith. My future pursues me like swift arrows on a map. My foot says no. It tries to scatter my story before the ink adheres to parchment. A wanderer and a sojourner I will be. I try to outrun my future. I run away from my grandmothers. I run to forests suspended 19 miles above sea level. I look down upon clouds. I walk among deer. The last snowfall in early spring covers our tracks. I lose myself in crowds, in lecture halls, ideas trailing out to the margins. I teeter at the opening of singers' mouths, on the edge of a chasm of strange worlds. I have peered into the windows of Ahasuerus's feast. Rivers always stop me. Rivers spring up on my back where the code to my identity is imprinted. My back, my true north, puts a stop to my wandering. My back is scaffolding that I climb to find God. In my senses, in my vertebrae, I know him. At night when I dream, it's not the brilliant, intoxicating wisdom of Edom that visits me. Strange princes do not people my dreams, nor do exotic rhythms insinuate themselves. I hear my grandmother's voice. Dorme, dorme, sleep. Imagine twin loaves, clouds, a flame that rises in itself. My dreams whisper to me like faithful handmaiden. They wait among fragrant myrtles. I sleep all day, but at night he awakens me with the scent of apples. He refuses to abandon me. He carries me until I cancel my detours. They fade like spider veins on an antiquated map. I remove my disguises one by one. I know him, and he knows me, his displaced princess, his runaway bride. I forget all the languages I once knew. I have no other tongue but tefillah. I travel to the inner chamber, to the crystal center of each moment. It is time to awaken, to shake out the golden dust hidden in folds, to bring the dream image onto the canvas, the lyrics of psalms written at night when I remember his name. Let the scroll unfold its story, birth and loss, gallows and redemption, threats and kings, Ish Yehudi, refusal to bow, feast and fast, a fluid form that pulls the eye right to left, and in the center, a woman. A woman the scroll is wound upon. She waits. Who knows but for this moment? Moments open for her like morning blossoms, mistress of 70 and 20 and 100 provinces, mistress over space and time. I find her among myrtles. I unwind my scroll. I follow the trajectory of my story from here to Shemayim and back to dormant seeds he guarded while I slept and slept. I pour out the letters, all the letters. I hold none back, even if they spell fear or shame. They spell his name. I raise my parchment scroll over my head. Let the first light, the Ayelet HaShachar, be written here.
It's called Desperate Love for Sayings of the Fathers. The other day I found myself saying to someone, I have a desperate love for sayings of the Fathers. Then I realized this was not understood. Sayings of the Fathers is in the prayer book, but maybe no one has encountered it quite the way I have. It really began in Berkeley in the 60s, a time of momentous conversation in which we believed that we were figuring out what was wrong with the world and how we were going to fix it. Of course, I view it now as a time of breakage. The forms in which we had lived were gleefully broken, and this very exciting energy was released, which I, for one, hoped would go to the making of new forms, but it didn't. And so instead it dissipated, and nothing happened except everything got worse. But just to the point where I sensed things would go that way, I was prompted to read Buber's Tales of the Hasidim, which threw me into a world where such conversation was seemingly a regular part of life. And since this was associated with Judaism, I too became associated with Judaism, and someone I met at Hillel presented me with a prayer book and called my attention to sayings of the fathers, and I understood that this was the original of that conversation I wanted to reconvene. That is, I heard not just a collection of sayings, but a deposit of understandings of how those involved in such conversation should relate to each other, so as to cut out all the noise of ego and come together on what could still be done. I have a friend who wants to convene the Sanhedrin. I'd like to start a kind of 12-step foundation focused on the parts we might play in representing the possibility of repairing the world. It seems a wilder fantasy than ever, but since the next major holiday is now Purim, I thought I'd bring it up. If the world turns upside down, even for a moment, this next full moon of Adar, maybe someone else, somewhere, will think it could happen.
Lose eternal life, I don my robes, perfume wrists, and line my eyes and lips before I dare approach him. For how can I sit protected and ignore my people's plight? How can I refuse to act when their existence hangs like an autumn leaf on an oak? Will my 3-day fast move heaven? Will my people's prayers be heard? Will he extend his scepter of gold? Or will he, in anger, remove me before I say a word? If he grants my request, tomorrow, instead of sitting with the wise, at a sacred feast of savories and meat, I shall sit with pompous pigs at a pagan spread of pastries and wines. And if not,
this is called Esther's Angels. In Esther's scroll, God is hidden, but there are plenty of angels. My favorites are the gardeners, devilishly uprooting trees in the king's garden. Haman's orders, they say. Infuriated, the king bursts into the banquet hall, finds Haman sprawled on Esther's couch. An angel pushed him. The bad guys have lost control. Like Pharaoh's stone heart, everything conspires against them. Haman's gallows rise to doom him. Timing is everything, like poetry, like breathing. Esther knows when to conceal, when to reveal. Her procession into the throne room, green with grief, with terror, infuriates the king. He means to turn away, but an angel swivels his head towards her. Another stretches the golden scepter as far as Pharaoh's daughter's hand, extended to rescue Moses. I once heard that in heaven our life replays in slow motion, action by action, scene by scene. Only this time we see behind the screen how bad things happen to issue in the good. It all lies spread before us, a resplendent banquet.
And the finale.
And the finale. Okay, switch glasses. Hold on, so I got here. Esther. I hide behind my mask. I hide my mask in a pouch with my other parcels. No one must know what I am hiding or why. My long lashes are not mine. My lips speak for others. My nose is caressed by fragrances that I have never known, but no one may find my mask. Far from the braying bulls and lolling lilies, I may remove my mask, weary with hiding, heavy with defying, away from peering eyes. While they get drunk, I must remain sober. While our enemies plot, I must remain calm. Yet I do all this and more behind my mask. I pray that by the grace that he gave me and the courage that comes from above, I may thwart the plans of evil and finally remove my mask. Don't clap yet. The final poem of the evening is called Ta-da! The microphone stands before me. Ta-da! It whispers, and then someone turns it on, and it turns on my voice. Ta-da! Yeah, I cannot stop. I welcome, I give directions, I whisper and I purr. I catch everyone's attention in my fist by the microphone and hold it fast within my grip. And finally, a voice inside me, or beside me in this case, begins to make tiny demands. Enough, it shouts, and pulls me off the stage like a flop vaudeville act, but not before I get a thunderous applause.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's the end of our evening. It's been beautiful, it's been lovely. If there are any comments or questions, I'd be happy to take them before we adjourn. Anybody? Feel like saying something? Thank you. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. You've been with us straight through. And we appreciate it. We appreciate your support of us and of poetry. Yes?
What is the name of our wonderful flutist?
The name of?
Our flutist.
The musician. Dvorah.
Dvorah Belenki. I did introduce her at the beginning. Yes. And she added immeasurably. I can't get over it. What a great idea, Esther. And we enjoyed it so much, and it really enhanced the music of our poetry and of our souls. I thank you so much for coming. I wish you a good night, a happy Adar, and a wonderful Purim.